Hi guys, so today we're going to be discussing literacy strategy number 43, which is storyboards. This can be found on page 131 in your book. So what is a storyboard? A storyboard are cards on which the illustrations from a picture book have been attached. Teachers may make storyboards by cutting apart two copies of a book and gluing the pages on a piece of tag board or just simply taping them on your board. Many people also make them by simply drawing the scenes and characters from the story themselves, which is pretty much what you'll have your students doing. It is hard to have enough copies of a book for students to cut apart and create their own storyboards. And that's why many have to draw their own versions, which in my opinion, drawing your own version is more fun. A storyboard is essentially an outline of what happens in the story using the images from the story. And the final product will resemble a comic strip. The most important use of a storyboard is to sequence the events of a story by lining the cards up either on a chalkboard tray, on your dry erase board, or hanging them up on a clothesline in your classroom. In order to sequence a story, you need to know the beginning, the middle, which is everything in between, and the end of the story. I have included a worksheet with boxes where students will draw the images themselves and they can create dialogue underneath on the lines. Rather than hanging them up and cutting apart books, they'll just use their own worksheet. The teacher will usually have an example hanging on the board or on a clothesline or just their own drawn version on their smart board or whatever they use in their classroom. And once the pages of a picture book had been laid out by the teacher, the students were able to visualize the story and its structure in new ways and closely examine the illustrations. Upon completion of the storyboards, you should be able to retell the story and understand the story by looking at the drawings. That's why a lot of teachers will choose stories that students are familiar with already, especially for the first time around. And the copy of the worksheet I have right here, if you can see it. So there are 8 boxes. Some teachers can use more or less if they choose, and students will draw the different scenes of the story, and then they can create dialogue underneath on these lines if they choose to. So how to use this instructional strategy? The first thing you do, and like I said, this is kind of optional, but this is the part that'll be done by the teacher. You will collect 2 copies of a book, preferably paperback because one, they're cheaper, and they're more ideal for teachers to use. Number 2 is to cut the books apart. The first thing teachers need to do is, of course, remove the covers of the book and then cut along the different lines of the pages to cut them apart. You can leave the text if you want so students can examine it along with the images, or you can cut it off so it gets the students thinking about what's really going on in the image. Number 3 is you will attach the pieces of paper, the pages to the cardboard, on the board, clothesline, wherever you have them in the classroom. And you can glue the pages to the cardboard or tape them to the board or use magnets so that you can point to each sequence easier when teaching the students about it. Step 4 is laminating the card. Now, this is really optional because lamination, if your school doesn't have the machine, can be very expensive. So, but laminating stuff, I mean, we all know it tends to last longer. So if you are planning on using this activity with your future students, it is very recommended to laminate because, like I said, it will last longer. And the last step is step 5, and that is use the cards in sequencing activities. So there are a number of activities you can use this for. You can use them for rereading, so retelling a story, story structuring, and just like mixing them up and having the students try to put them back in order to try to retell the story to themselves after hearing it. Parts of a storyboard. So a storyboard consists of 5 different parts. First is the story, and you have to know the story in order to create the storyboard. And in knowing the story, it keeps you from missing any key parts that are important and allows you to better organize your board. Step 2 is the characters. When explaining the storyboard to the students, they will need to know who the characters are. And if you allow the students to create their own boards by drawing on the worksheet or whatever you choose to use, You must keep in mind that their characters and their illustrations are not going to be exactly like the story. It is technically going to be their own version, but you're allowing them to use their creativity. Number 3 is the dialogue. So storyboards not only show the characters, but it should show what the characters are doing and or saying. This and doing that creates the dialogue. The storyboard should show how the characters are feeling through their facial expressions, their words, and their actions. Number 4 are time frames. This is the part that may be difficult for the younger children and may work better for the older ones. The time frame should show how much time passes between each scene. Now, like I said, the younger ones are really going to have a harder time with this, and this strategy can be used honestly up to high school if you choose, but I think it would be best to stop at middle school using it. So I'd say the time frame would work best for 5th grade through 8th grade. And the last step is camera details and or story details. So I like to think of camera details as the images in the story. So most classes will not be using a camera to create their storyboards, and the camera details may be used by older students in middle and high school, depending on the resources that their school does have. So really the story details for the younger grades would be the images and the details they draw within each box. So this is the student handout. It's the exact one I'm holding. So as you can see, there are 8 boxes, so 8 steps to the story. Some stories may have more, some stories may have less, depending on what story you choose or your students choose to have them do it on. You can get a different worksheet, but I say this one works pretty well. And it has 3 lines underneath each box, so you can give a little bit of an idea of what's going on in each box. And in the end, I think it'll look like a comic strip. Here's an example. This one I really liked. It's kind of blurry, but you can tell it's based off the book Cinderella. So in the first box, you can see they're saying work, 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 and there's Cinderella scrubbing the floors with her 2 stepsisters. And then she goes to the ball, or the sisters go to the ball. And then it says she's crying for fairy godmother, and she shows up and she goes to the ball. And then they missed a few parts, but you can tell what the story is. And it turns back to her old rags. And then she loses the slipper, and then she tries on the slipper, and then she is happily ever after with her prince. So I really liked this example. I thought it was really cute. This is a more mature example. I'm not sure exactly what story it is, but you can see the details in it and how much time was put into it. And I think this looks awesome. I think it'd be great to let your students color in their pictures rather than just using a pencil like on the last image, because it allows them to be creative. And last but not least, these are my references. I hope you understand what a storyboard is and are able to use this in your classroom in the future. Thank you.